The champagne glass trembled in my hand, not from nerves, but from restraint. I'd spent 6 months building this moment, every file, every timestamp, every sleepless night leading right here. The ballroom glittered with Nixora's triumph, golden uplights, sleek banners, cameras flashing beneath a skyline of rain-soaked glass. Seattle's night pressed against the windows like it wanted in. My boss, Derek Langford, stood at the center of it all, perfect suit, perfect smile, perfectly rehearsed lie. He raised his glass toward me. "So," he said, loud enough for the crowd to turn, "you finally got your name on the patent. Right." The words landed like a match in a room full of gas. Conversations cut off mid-laugh. Someone dropped a fork. The band faltered. All eyes shifted to me, just another quiet engineer in a black dress, standing beneath the lights that once blinded me at his presentations. I met his gaze and smiled. "What patent?" For one exquisite second, the world stopped breathing. The General Counsel, Victoria Hale, turned her head sharply from the press table. Her voice sliced the silence clean. "Then who signed it?" Derek froze. His charm cracked. There must be." But the CEO was already moving through the crowd, his expression carved from stone. "We'll talk," he said. "Now." Flashbulbs went off, whispers ignited like static. I could almost hear the gears turning the legal department, the investors, the board members calculating risk in real time. I didn't flinch. I'd already done the math. 6 months of stolen work. 6 months of being erased line by line. 6 months of collecting proof too solid to bury. When Derek turned to leave with the CEO and legal, his face had the pallor of someone realizing the oxygen's gone from the room. I set my glass down on the nearest table, the faint ring it left as deliberate as a signature. My pulse slowed. It was over for him. Almost. 2 days earlier. I was still that woman at her desk, the one watching her office plant die under fluorescent light, never imagining it was a warning for what was about to come. 2 days earlier, the morning light was the same color as the monitor glow cold, synthetic, and far too bright for how tired I felt. My desk sat near the server room, where the air was always a few degrees too dry. That's where the plant lived, or rather, died. It had been a gift from my sister when I got promoted to lead engineer, a small pothos, low maintenance, practically unkillable, but under Nixora's fluorescent lights, even unkillable things gave up eventually. Its leaves had gone from deep green to the color of old paper. I hadn't watered it in a week, yet somehow it had found its own way to die. I looked at it that morning and thought, that's about right. Most days were quiet here, except for the hum of the cooling fans and the occasional high heel echoing down the corridor. My world had shrunk to loops of code and graphs that no one outside my team understood. The predictive logistics engine had become my life, an algorithm that recalculated lead times in real time, shaving millions off supply chain waste. The kind of thing investors salivate over. It wasn't glamorous work. It was precision, patience, discipline, the kind of brilliance that doesn't announce itself until it's stolen. Derek called my code too complex for the demo. He had this habit of simplifying things until they were his. He'd rewrite my documentation, tweak variable names, and call it making it presentable. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself the work would speak for itself. We were in a Tuesday stand-up when I first noticed the shift. Derek was at the whiteboard, pointing at a flowchart I had built line by line. He called it our breakthrough, smiling like he'd pulled it from the ether. Everyone clapped. I sipped my coffee and kept quiet. After the meeting, one of the interns, a bright-eyed girl named Lexi, leaned over and whispered, "So, are you gonna be on the patent?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She frowned, like I'd asked something strange. "Well, you built it, didn't you?" I watched her walk away, the hum of the server room filling the silence she left behind. The plant on my desk had lost another leaf. By Wednesday morning, The air in the office felt heavier, as if the vents were pushing out something thicker than oxygen. I logged in early, the way I always did, coffee in hand, hair still damp from the rain. My inbox blinked with its usual flood of meeting invites and system alerts. But when I tried to open the patent documentation folder, the one where I'd stored every model iteration and draft, a gray pop-up appeared on my screen. Access denied. No warning, no explanation, just a digital wall where my work used to be. I tried again, thinking it was a permissions glitch. The same message appeared. I checked the admin settings. My name had been quietly removed from the access list. Someone had cleaned the slate. A slow pulse rose behind my eyes. I pushed back from the desk and walked the corridor that smelled faintly of ozone and carpet cleaner. The executives' offices lined the far end, frosted glass. Minimalist plaques, expensive silence. As I passed, I heard voices through a half-open door. 2 VPs I barely knew were speaking in the low tone of people discussing something that shouldn't be overheard. Glad we cleaned up the IP before the board got involved. One said, "Yeah," the other replied. Langford handled it smoothly. No loose ends. I froze, just for a moment, then kept walking. Slow, deliberate. The way you do when you realize you've stumbled into something meant to stay hidden. Later that afternoon, I caught Derek by the espresso machine, casual as ever. Sleeves rolled up, charm switched on. "Oh, that folder thing," he said when I asked. "Just legal tightening permissions ahead of the launch? Nothing personal. Everything's been submitted with all the right names." He smiled like it was a compliment. I smiled back like I believed him. That night, my apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain on glass. I plugged in my spare drive, the little yellow rubber duck I'd kept for personal backups, and began copying every local file I owned. Git logs, commits, version histories, even the rejected prototypes. Each one time-stamped, each one mine, if they were cleaning house. I'd keep what mattered before they swept it away. The yellow rubber duck sat on my desk like a joke that had aged badly. A souvenir from a hackathon years ago. It doubled as a USB drive, something I kept around out of habit more than necessity. That night, though, it became my vault. I plugged it in and watched the transfer bar crawl across the screen. Slow and deliberate. Every folder I'd ever touched, source files, prototypes, test data, commit logs flowed into that tiny plastic bird. I encrypted the drive, gave it a passphrase no one could guess, and labeled it with a strip of masking tape Q7. It wasn't the first time I'd had to protect my work. Months earlier, Derek had accidentally deleted my branch history during a merge. He'd stood by my desk with that half-apologetic grin, saying, "Weird glitch. Git can be unpredictable sometimes." Then he'd patted the back of my chair like I was a child who'd spilled her juice. I spent 3 nights rebuilding what he'd erased. That was the first time I realized silence could be its own weapon, his and mine. Now. I scrolled through old Slack messages while the backup continued. Thread after thread, he'd commented on my code with phrases that stung more than they should have. Let's simplify this. Too technical for the pitch deck. Make it more digestible. Every simplification turned my work into something that could be stolen more easily. I opened my notebook, the one I kept hidden behind a row of outdated API manuals. On a blank page, I wrote slowly, pressing hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. Ownership is a stamp. Authorship is memory. The rain outside had turned into a steady rhythm, tapping against the window like a metronome. In the reflection, I saw the faint outline of my self-tired eyes. Coffee cup half empty, the glow of code mirrored in the glass. I unplugged the duck, wrapped it in a piece of cloth, and slid it into the drawer beneath a stack of unused notebooks. Then I sat back, listening to the quiet hum of the servers through the wall. If they wanted to erase me, they'd have to start by erasing what I remembered. By the time Friday arrived, I'd perfected the art of pretending. I smiled through stand-ups, typed polite replies, and laughed in the right places. On the surface, I looked fine. Underneath, every nerve was a wire pulled too tight. I texted Ava Moreno that morning. We hadn't talked in months, not since she'd transferred from compliance to legal, but she'd always been sharp. Careful. The kind of person who noticed what others ignored. Coffee at 11, I wrote. My treat. She replied in seconds, edge and ember. You got it. The cafe sat 2 blocks from the office, the kind of neutral ground where gossip could pass for small talk. When she walked in, she looked at the same blazer over jeans, hair in a low bun, phone still in hand even as she smiled. God, it's been forever, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. We talked about everything that didn't matter, first Seattle's endless rain, her dog's knee surgery, the burnt coffee at Nixora. When she finally exhaled, I asked lightly, so, how's it going with the patent filings? Must be chaos before the launch. She blinked. The kind of pause that gives a secret away before the words ever come. Which filing, the logistics engine? I said, steady. Derek mentioned it was finalized. Her expression faltered, not surprise, but recognition. The kind of look people wear when they realize they've walked into a conversation they can't control. Wait, she said slowly. You mean the predictive routing patent? I nodded. Ava looked down at her cup, fingers tightening around the cardboard sleeve. Elara, you're not listed. For a moment, the sound of the cafe blurred the clatter of cups, the low music, everything. Just a single sentence, and the world tilted. She lowered her voice. It must be a mistake. I'll check discreetly. Okay. I managed to smile, but something inside me settled, not shock, not confusion, just a cold clarity. Mistakes didn't lock folders. Mistakes didn't scrub names. When she left, I stayed, staring at the coffee gone cold. The reflection on the surface showed 2 faces, mine, and the one I used to be before I learned what it meant to be erased. The meeting invite came through at 8:03 a.m. Subject line, quick alignment chat. No context, no agenda. Just the kind of corporate vagueness that meant trouble. I arrived at the glass-walled HR office 15 minutes later, inside. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender, the company's idea of calm. Melanie, our HR partner, sat waiting with her clipboard angled just so, a smile as soft as a warning. Thanks for coming. Elara, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. This won't take long. I sat, careful to match her tone. Of course. She began with flattery, the kind that sounds rehearsed. You've been such a cornerstone for the product team. Derek speaks very highly of your technical work. She paused, reading from her notes. We just want to make sure your energy is focused where it's most valuable during this next phase. There it was, the polite preamble before the push. I folded my hands. And where exactly is that? Well, she said, glancing down again. Derek mentioned you might be stepping back a bit from core feature development to focus on mentorship and documentation. A leadership pivot. You know, less hands-on, more advisory. Her tone was honey, but the message was acid. I smiled. Funny. I didn't realize I was stepping back. She blinked, smile tightening. Oh, perhaps I misunderstood. No, I said, still calm. You heard exactly what you were told. For a second, her composure flickered, and I saw it, the script faltering when the other actor doesn't play along. She closed her notebook, murmured something about clarifying expectations, and ended the meeting early. Back at my desk, I stared at my inbox until the screen blurred. Then I opened a new folder titled Archive, and inside it, every project email since launch prep began, every meeting summary, saved as PDF, screenshots of permissions logs, printer metadata from the night Derek printed the draft. By lunch, I'd automated the process, everything duplicated, time-stamped, encrypted, safe. If they were building a narrative, I'd build a record. That afternoon, I caught my reflection in the darkened monitor. The woman looking back wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. The office was nearly empty when I went back that night. The rain outside blurred the city lights into a watercolor haze, and every corridor hummed with the kind of silence that makes you listen harder. I told security I'd left a drive running on my workstation half true. Down the hall, the printer room glowed faintly blue, the machines stacked like quiet sentinels. The smell of toner lingered, sharp and sterile. A stack of papers sat in the discard tray, curled at the edges from heat. I reached for them out of habit, flipping through test pages and orientation drafts until I saw it. Nexora Provisional Patent Draft V3. The title hit harder than the chill in the room. I turned to the first page. Author Derek Langford. No co-inventors, no references, no trace of me. I read the abstract line by line. My own logic mirrored back at me in someone else's voice, my code structure, my phrasing. Even the example data sets I'd generated from scratch. The work I'd built in 100 late nights had been printed, rebranded, and submitted under his name. My pulse slowed instead of racing. I folded the stack, slipped it into a manila folder, and walked to my desk without a sound. The scanner whirred softly as I fed the pages through. Each click was precise, methodical, final. I saved the file, logged the printer's serial number and job ID, then opened my command terminal and ran a checksum hash on the document. The string of numbers appeared on the screen, immutable proof. I backed it up in 3 places, an encrypted cloud vault, a password-locked USB, and a hidden email account I hadn't used since grad school. Then I took a photo of the printer's job queue timestamp, user ID, internal IP range, all tied to the building's network. When it was done, I leaned against the desk and listened. The printer's hum filled the room again, steady and rhythmic, like a heart that didn't know it had betrayed its body. Outside, thunder rolled across the sound, faint but certain. I packed the folder into my bag, turned off the lights, and walked out into the rain. Ava called me just after noon the next day. Her voice was steady, but there was something in it, a thin thread of disbelief, pulled too tight. I checked the filing, she said. It's worse than we thought. I set my mug down, careful not to spill. How bad he backdated everything. The final submission was pushed through 2 weeks before the launch notice went out. And your e-signature, it's not yours. I didn't speak for a moment. Outside my window, Seattle rain traced crooked lines down the glass. The city beyond blurred and gray. He forged it, I said finally. Ava exhaled. I cross-checked the digital hash. It doesn't match the one legal has on file for you. This wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. The world around me shrank to the sound of her voice and the faint ticking of the office clock. What now, we loop in general counsel. Quietly. We met that evening in a private conference room on the 17th floor, long after most of the staff had gone home. The city lights bled through the windows, catching on the brushed steel of the Nexora logo on the wall. Victoria Hale, general counsel, listened without interrupting as Ava laid out the evidence. When she spoke, her tone was calm, almost detached. We'll initiate a compliance review before the launch, she said. No internal memo, no noise. But this needs to be handled delicately. The board can't hear a whisper of it until we confirm the forgery. Her gaze settled on me. You still planning to attend the launch? Yes, I said. Wouldn't miss it. She studied me for a beat, then nodded. Good. Keep your composure. We'll take it from there. When I left the building, the rain had stopped. The streets were slick with reflections, neon and streetlights stretched thin across puddles. My reflection moved among them. Calm. Deliberate. The invitation to the launch party was still open in my inbox when I got home. I clicked accept. If Derek wanted a celebration, I'd give him one worth remembering. The ballroom glittered like a stage built for deceit mirrors, chandeliers, soft jazz humming under the clink of glassware. From the balcony, Seattle's skyline flickered against the water, 1,000 lights pretending to be stars. I arrived 40 minutes late, deliberately. By then, the cameras were rolling, the investors were drunk on champagne and profit forecasts, and Derek Langford was in his element. He stood on the raised platform near the Nexora banner, his voice rich with the polish of a man who'd practiced sincerity in front of a mirror. Innovation, he said, isn't a solo act, it's a chorus of brilliance, a harmony of ideas that move us forward. The audience laughed softly, Charmed. I stayed near the back. Black dress. No badge. Hand steady. Ava caught my eye from across the room. She was with two members of compliance, their expressions unreadable, phones discreetly angled in recording mode. Derek lifted his glass, scanning the crowd. His gaze landed on me. For a second, his rhythm faltered. Then he smiled wide. Practiced? Dangerous. And speaking of teamwork, he said, "Elara Quinn is here tonight. You finally got your name on the patent. Right." The room hushed, like someone had turned off the air. The pause stretched. Electric. I met his eyes. Calm. Unblinking. What patent? A ripple went through the crowd. The general counsel, Victoria Hale, turned sharply toward Derek, then who signed it. Her voice carried over the speakers, cutting through the music. Derek's smile collapsed. The legal team. Before he could finish, the CEO, Marcus Reed, stepped forward, face rigid. "We'll talk. Now." Phones lifted. The murmur swelled like wind through glass. Derek's hand trembled. Champagne sloshed onto his cuff. He tried to laugh it off, but no one was laughing. Ava moved closer, her phone still recording. Compliance followed, quiet and precise. The circle around Derek tightened, the crowd parting in slow disbelief. He turned toward me once more, searching for mercy. I offered none. The music stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. In it, I heard the sound of something breaking his career, his control, maybe even the illusion that truth could stay buried forever. It took less than 48 hours for the fallout to reach every corner of the building. By Monday morning, Derek's name was gone from the executive directory, his badge access revoked, his glass-walled office dark. Legal had moved faster than I'd expected. The audit uncovered everything, the backdated submissions, the falsified e-signature, the mirrored code files he'd renamed as his own. Even the printer logs matched the night I'd stayed late. I didn't gloat. I just watched it happen quietly, like a tide pulling back after a storm. People avoided my eyes in the hallway. Not out of guilt, but out of confusion they'd never seen the company move this decisively. HR sent a memo about realigning leadership expectations. Compliance held closed-door reviews. Ava walked past my desk one morning, set a cup of coffee down without a word, and kept moving. That was enough. By Wednesday afternoon, an envelope arrived on my desk. Inside was a single sheet, the updated provisional patent certificate. My name printed beside his. Equal spacing. No asterisk. No footnote. Clean. Final. I traced the letters with my thumb once, then folded the paper neatly and slid it into the drawer beside the yellow rubber duck drive. The two things sat together like bookends, proof of what I'd built, and proof of what I'd survived. The office felt different now. The tension that used to hum under every conversation had thinned, replaced by a strange kind of reverence. Someone had watered the plant on my desk while I wasn't looking. Its leaves were soft, green again, small veins reaching toward the light. I opened Slack, typed Derek's name into the search bar, and pressed delete. No alert, no confirmation message. Just silence. The hum of the servers filled the space where his voice used to live. It wasn't triumph I felt, not even relief. Just the quiet weight of balance being restored. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, it simply breathes.